Hello, my precious friends. Tonight we're diving into a story that might just make you rethink what it means to be a master of anything, be it a sword, a brush, or even your own mind. Imagine, if you will, the clatter of steel on steel, the quiet focus of a monk in meditation, and the roar of a battlefield strategist directing armies. We're stepping into the world of the samurai, but not just any samurai. Tonight, we're focusing on the legends, the figures whose lives didn't just exemplify the way of the warrior, but actually forged it, leaving an indelible mark on Japanese history and beyond. We'll explore the lives of individuals like Miyamoto Musashi, the enigmatic master swordsman whose duels became legend, and the formidable unifiers, Oda Nobunaga and Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who wrestled Japan out of chaos and into a new era. You probably won't survive the sheer amount of ancient rivalries and political intrigue if your idea of drama is a reality TV show. But don't worry, we'll keep it low-key. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from in the comments and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Our story begins not with a grand entrance, but with the tumultuous and somewhat obscure beginnings of Miyamoto Musashi. Born Shinmen Dekizo in 1584, into a Japan still reeling from the chaos of the Sengoku warring states. Musashi's early life was anything but peaceful. You see, he came into a world where conflict was the air people breathed, and survival often depended on the sharpness of your blade and your wits. His father, Munisai, was a skilled martial artist himself, specializing in the juddy, a short iron truncheon, and the tudi, a resting hand, techniques. But young Musashi's relationship with his father was reportedly difficult, even estranged. This early familial strife and the backdrop of constant warfare shaped a fiercely independent and often rebellious spirit. The details of his youth, though shrouded in legend, paint a picture of a boy who was rough-hewn, volatile, and already showing extraordinary aptitude for combat. Imagine a young Musashi, perhaps a mere 7 years old, already practicing with a wooden sword, his movements raw but intensely focused. He wasn't playing. He was preparing for a life that demanded unrelenting skill. His first recorded duel, a mainstream historical fact, occurred when he was just 13 years old. His opponent was Arima Kihei, a samurai of the Shinto-ryu school. Kihei, a more experienced warrior, challenged Musashi to a duel. According to accounts, Musashi reportedly disarmed and then beat Kihei to death with a wooden staff. It's an incredibly brutal introduction to the world of Kengo, master swordsman, and Ronin, masterless samurai. It's like your first little league game ending with a knockout, but with real stakes and wooden bats. You probably won't survive this level of early onset competitiveness without needing a very strict bedtime. This victory, disturbing as it might seem, set the tone for Musashi's early career. He didn't seek formal education in philosophy or courtly arts. His schooling was a battlefield. His teachers were his opponents, and his classrooms were the dust and blood of duels. He was a product of his time, a restless soul who found purpose and identity in the pursuit of martial perfection. He would spend his formative years wandering Japan, engaging in countless duels, a true Musashi warrior's pilgrimage. A quirky tidbit from this period, though the specifics are debatable, suggests Musashi had a less-than charming personality in his youth. Stories depict him as unkempt, rarely bathing, and prone to outbursts. This contrasts sharply with the later image of the serene, philosophical strategist he would become. It's almost as if he was too busy fighting for his life to worry about laundry or personal grooming. Imagine the smell after a few weeks on the road, battling everyone from skilled samurai to stray bandits. You probably wouldn't want to share a futon with him back then. Historians still argue whether Musashi's early duels were always formal challenges, or if some were more akin to street brawls, given his reputation for being rough. What's clear is that his early experiences were crucial in shaping his unique, pragmatic approach to combat, emphasizing adaptability and decisive action over rigid adherence to any single school's forms. He wasn't interested in pretty moves. He was interested in winning and surviving. His life during this period was one of constant movement, a quest for ultimate understanding through direct confrontation. He would seek out renowned sword masters from different schools, challenging them, learning from their styles, and dismantling their techniques. This wasn't just about proving superiority. It was about refining his own way, understanding the nuances of combat in the most direct and unforgiving way possible. He was collecting data points, one duel at a time, each one a lesson in life and death. So, Musashi's early life was a crucible, forging a young man into a formidable, albeit wild, warrior. He was a force of nature, untamed by formal schooling, but singularly focused on the path of the sword. His journey, fueled by raw talent and a restless spirit, was just beginning, leading him towards legendary encounters and, eventually, a profound philosophical understanding of combat and life itself. From the raw, untamed youth of Miyamoto Musashi, constantly seeking duels and honing his formidable yet brutal skills, his journey continued along the path of the warrior. You see, after his shockingly early victory against Arima Kei, Musashi embarked on what would become his legendary Musashi, a solitary warrior's pilgrimage across Japan, seeking out and challenging masters from various sword schools. This period of relentless dueling and self-refinement is a mainstream historical fact, central to the development of his unique, unparalleled fighting style. Imagine Musashi, a solitary figure, often armed with just a wooden sword, or even two, traversing the rugged landscapes of early 17th century Japan. He wasn't part of a retinue or a clan. His allegiance was solely to his own quest for martial enlightenment. His encounters weren't always formal affairs in grand dojos. Sometimes they were roadside challenges, spur-of-the-moment tests of skill, often ending with Musashi emerging victorious, leaving behind a trail of defeated and occasionally dead opponents. It was like a medieval real-life fighting game, but with permanent consequences and significantly more walking. You probably won't survive this level of constant, unscheduled combat without investing heavily in comfortable walking sandals and a very good chiropractor. One of the most significant encounters in this early period, though less famous than his later duel with Kojiro, was a series of challenges against the Yoshioka school in Kyoto. The Yoshioka were a prestigious and ancient fencing family, renowned for their sword style and serving as instructors to the Ashikaga shoguns. Musashi, still in his late teens or early 20s, arrived in Kyoto and, with typical audacity, challenged the head of the school, Yoshioka Seijiro. The first duel, according to legend, took place in the northern suburbs of Kyoto. Seijiro reportedly arrived with katana long sword, while Musashi was armed only with bakken wooden sword. Musashi won this encounter, disabling Seijiro's arm with a single strike, forcing the master to concede. It was a humiliating defeat for the venerable school, like a reigning chess grandmaster being beaten by a Brass Street kid using only pawns. A quirky tidbit about this duel, as often recounted, is Musashi's deliberate tactic of arriving late, sometimes very late, for his duels. This wasn't laziness. It was a psychological tactic. It would irritate and unnerve his opponents, making them impatient, angry, and therefore less focused. Imagine standing around, waiting for a high-stakes duel, checking your sundial every 5 minutes, getting more and more frustrated. That's exactly what Musashi wanted. He probably would have been a master of ghosting in modern dating. Historians still argue whether the number of duels Musashi fought and the specific details of each are entirely accurate or if they have been embellished over time, given his legendary status. What's clear is that the Yoshioka duels, regardless of exact specifics, were pivotal in establishing Musashi's reputation as a formidable and unconventional swordsman. The Yoshioka school, humiliated, then sent Yoshioka Denshikaro, Seijiro's younger brother, to challenge Musashi. This duel supposedly took place near a lotus field. Again, Musashi arrived late, and again, he defeated his opponent, this time fatally. The disgrace for the Yoshioka family was now immense. But the Yoshioka family was not yet ready to give up. They gathered their remaining forces, led by the youngest brother, Yoshioka Matashikuro, a mere boy, but also planning an ambush. The duel was arranged for a Chijoji temple, set for dawn. This time, Musashi arrived hours early, surprising the Yoshioka ambushers. He allegedly attacked first, killed Matashikuro, and then fought off the entire group, escaping unharmed. This final engagement against the Yoshioka, by some accounts, solidified his invincible reputation. It showed not just his fighting prowess, but his shrewd tactical mind, anticipating his enemies' moves. Musashi's encounters with the Yoshioka school are significant because they demonstrate his evolving combat philosophy. He wasn't just relying on brute strength or rigid forms. He was studying his opponents, exploiting their psychological weaknesses, adapting his strategy on the fly, and always seeking the most decisive, efficient path to victory, even if it meant breaking established etiquette. He was the ultimate disruptor in the world of traditional sword fighting. So, Musashi's pilgrimage, especially his triumphs over prestigious Yoshioka school, was a brutal but highly effective apprenticeship. Each duel was a lesson, each victory a step towards developing the unique and often unconventional methods that would later define his legend. He was cementing his reputation as an unstoppable force, a lone wolf of the sword, preparing for the iconic challenge that would forever etch his name into history. Having established his fearsome reputation through a string of decisive duels, most notably against a venerable Yoshioka school, Miyamoto Musashi was now considered a master swordsman. Yet, the pinnacle of his dueling career, the one that would forever define his legend and solidify his philosophy, was still to come. His iconic confrontation with Sasaki Kojiro. You see, this wasn't just another duel. It was a clash of titans, two of the greatest swordsmen in Japanese history facing off in a battle that transcended mere skill, becoming a symbol of martial artistry and strategic genius. This legendary duel and its dramatic conclusion are a mainstream historical fact, albeit one heavily romanticized in popular culture. Imagine the anticipation surrounding such an event. Kojiro, known by the nickname the Demon of the Western Provinces, was a formidable opponent, famous for his exceptionally long Nodachi sword, often called the drying pole, and his signature technique, the swallow cut tsubengeshi, said to be so fast it could strike down a bird in mid-flight. He represented the traditional, elegant, and highly refined schools of swordsmanship. Musashi, on the other hand, was the unconventional, pragmatic outsider, known for his unique two-sword style, ninnichiryu, and his often unorthodox tactics. It was like a showdown between a meticulously trained classical musician and a brilliant improvisational jazz artist, where the instruments were deadly sharp and the stakes were life and death. You probably won't survive this level of intense personal rivalry if your idea of a challenge is picking the right filter for your selfie. The duel was set for April 13th, 1612, on Ganryujima, a small, deserted island off the coast of Funashima. Musashi, true to his psychological tactics, arrived extremely late for the duel. This wasn't merely about annoying Kojiro. It was a deliberate strategy to unnerve him, make him impatient, and perhaps even slightly dehydrated under the morning sun. Kojiro, frustrated by the delay, was said to have sharpened his famous sword on a stone while he waited. A quirky tidbit about Musashi's arrival involves his mode of transport and his chosen weapon. He was reportedly ferried to the island by a local fisherman. During the short boat ride, he carved a bakken wooden sword from a spare oar, making it slightly longer than Kojiro's no dachi. This act of improvisation not only demonstrated his adaptability, but also provided him with psychological and slight physical advantage, catching Kojiro off guard. Imagine showing up to a fencing match, and your opponent pulls out a pool noodle, then proceeds to expertly defeat you with it. That's the level of unexpectedness. Historians still argue whether Musashi's choice of a wooden sword was truly a spontaneous improvisation or a calculated move to reinforce his legendary image and potentially provoke Kojiro. What's clear is that it was a bold and unconventional choice that played a significant role in the duel's narrative. Upon Musashi's arrival, Kojiro, enraged by the delay, immediately drew his no dachi, reportedly tossing his scabbard into the sea. Musashi supposedly taunted him, saying, "You have already lost Kojiro by discarding your scabbard," implying a lack of readiness to sheath his sword again, or perhaps just a psychological jab. The duel was swift and brutal. Kojiro lunged with his swallow cut. Musashi parried, then struck Kojiro on the head with his makeshift wooden sword, ending the duel. Some accounts say it was a single blow. Others mention a follow-up strike. Kojiro was dead. This victory over Kojiro, a renowned and skilled opponent, firmly cemented Musashi's reputation as the greatest swordsman of his era, perhaps of all time. It proved the efficacy of his unorthodox methods, his psychological warfare, and his adaptability. He had defeated the master of traditional school with a piece of wood, demonstrating that true mastery lay beyond rigid forms. It was the ultimate mic drop in the world of samurai dueling. After this duel, Musashi largely retired from formal dueling. He had nothing left to prove in one-on-one combat. His focus began to shift from physical prowess to a deeper understanding of strategy, philosophy, and the art of living itself. The legend of the invincible swordsman began to give way to profound insights of the philosopher-strategist. He had reached the summit of his warrior's pilgrimage, and now it was time to share the view. So, the duel with Sasaki Kojiro was not just a historical event. It was a defining moment in the legend of Miyamoto Musashi. It confirmed his unparalleled skill and his unique approach to combat. serving as a dramatic culmination of his relentless pursuit of martial perfection. With this victory, Musashi transitioned from a warrior of the blade to a master of the mind, preparing to leave behind a legacy that would echo for centuries. With the legendary duel against Sasaki Kojiro behind him, Miyamoto Musashi, having reached the pinnacle of individual martial prowess, entered a new phase of his extraordinary life. You see, the era of constant dueling was largely over for him. He had nothing left to prove in one-on-one combat. His focus now shifted inward, towards a deeper understanding of strategy, philosophy, and self-mastery, moving beyond mere physical combat. This period of introspection and the development of his mature philosophy is a mainstream historical fact, laying the groundwork for his enduring literary legacy. Imagine Musashi, no longer the wild, unkempt duelist, but more contemplative figure, perhaps clad in simpler, yet still dignified robes, seeking quietude in nature or within the confines of secluded hermitage. His travels continued, but with a different purpose. He began to dedicate himself to various arts beyond the sword: painting, calligraphy, sculpture, and even the art of tea. These pursuits were not distractions. For Musashi, they were extensions of his martial training, ways to cultivate focus, discipline, and a holistic understanding of rhythm and timing that applied equally to a brushstroke as to a sword stroke. It was like a professional athlete retiring from the field to become a renowned chess master and a landscape painter, proving true mastery transcends any single discipline. You probably won't survive this level of multifaceted talent if your idea of cross-training is switching between two different streaming services. During this period, Musashi often lived a solitary life, refining his nin'ichi-ryu, two heavens, one style, sword method, which involved wielding both the katana, long sword, and wakizashi, short sword, simultaneously. This unique style wasn't just a physical technique. It was a philosophical approach to combat, emphasizing adaptability, balance, and the ability to utilize all available resources. He believed that mastery meant not being limited by fixed forms, but flowing freely, like water, adapting to any situation. A quirky tidbit about Musashi's artistic endeavors is his famous ink wash paintings, particularly his birds and landscapes. These works often display a powerful simplicity and dynamism, reflecting the directness and economy of movement he sought in his swordsmanship. It's said he painted with his sword hand, demonstrating the profound connection he saw between his martial and artistic pursuits. Imagine trying to paint a detailed bird with the same hand you just used to chop firewood. That takes a special kind of dedication and muscle memory. Historians still argue whether Musashi's artistic talents were truly on par with his martial genius, or they gained prominence due to his later fame as a swordsman philosopher. What's clear is that his engagement with these arts provided him with a new lens through which to view and articulate his unique philosophy. Musashi also spent time serving various lords, though often for shorter periods, never fully settling down into the life of a typical retainer. He served as a military advisor, a castle designer, and even a teacher, applying his strategic insights to broader contexts than just one-on-one duels. This demonstrated his ability to translate his principles of individual combat into larger-scale strategic thinking, proving his mind was as sharp as his blades. He was essentially a high-level consultant, but instead of PowerPoint presentations, he offered wisdom forged in actual life-and-death encounters. One of his most significant periods of service came later in life when he entered the service of Lord Hosokawa Tadatoshi, the daimyo of the Kumamoto domain. This was not a typical master-vassal relationship, where Musashi would be expected to live in a feudal compound and perform mundane duties. Instead, Lord Hosokawa provided him with a stipend and relative freedom, allowing him to continue his artistic pursuits and focus on writing. This patronage was crucial, providing Musashi with the stability and resources to finally codify his lifetime of experience and wisdom. It was like receiving a grant to write your magnum opus, except your opus was about how to win sword fights, and by extension, how to win at life. It was during his final years, while living a hermit-like existence in a cave called Ryagando near Kumamoto, that Musashi embarked on his most enduring legacy, the writing of Gozen no Sho, or the Book of Five Rings. He completed this masterpiece just weeks before his death in 1645. This wasn't a manual for specific sword forms. It was a treatise on strategy, philosophy, and the principles of combat applicable to all aspects of life. So, Musashi's post-dueling life was a profound transformation. He transitioned from a relentless duelist to a contemplative philosopher and artist, driven by a desire to understand the deeper truths of his chosen path. His service to Lord Hosokawa provided the space for this introspection, culminating in the creation of the Book of Five Rings, a testament to his unique genius that would resonate far beyond the battlefields of feudal Japan. From a life of constant duels and the solitary refinement of his unique fighting style, Miyamoto Musashi's journey culminated in a secluded cave, Ryagando, where he penned his magnum opus, the Book of Five Rings, Gozen no Sho. You see, this wasn't just another martial arts manual. It was a profound philosophical treatise, a distillation of his lifetime of experience, thought, and strategic insight, applicable not only to combat, but to all aspects of life. This influential work and its enduring principles are a mainstream historical fact, continuing to shape understanding of strategy and self-mastery. Imagine Musashi, perhaps age around 60, his body weathered by countless duels and years of wandering, yet his mind sharp and clear, sitting by flickering candlelight in a quiet cave. He's not just recalling sword techniques. He's dissecting the very essence of conflict, decision-making, and the human spirit. The Book of Five Rings is divided into 5 books, each named after a natural element: earth, water, fire, wind, and void. Each book explores a different facet of strategy, building from the foundational to the ethereal. It's like a comprehensive self-help guide, but written by a guy who regularly settled arguments with a piece of wood. You probably won't survive this level of intense philosophical insight if your idea of deep thinking is scrolling through social media memes. The Book of Earth lays the groundwork, discussing the general principles of strategy. It emphasizes the importance of understanding your path, your tools, and your environment. Musashi advises studying diligently, practicing constantly, and avoiding complacency. It's about having a solid foundation, knowing your basics cold, and never thinking you've learned enough. Think of it as the bedrock for all subsequent knowledge, where he basically says, don't just swing blindly, know what you're doing. The Book of Water delves into specific techniques and the fluidity of movement. Musashi likens strategy to water, which adapts its form to any container. He stresses the importance of flexibility, rhythm, and timing in combat. It's about being adaptable, moving without hesitation, and understanding the ebb and flow of any confrontation. This section talks about stances, grips, and various sword techniques, but always within the larger framework of adaptable strategy. It's like learning to dance, but the dance involves sharp objects and very high stakes. A quirky tidbit about Musashi's approach to the two-sword style, detailed in the Book of Water, is his insistence that holding a sword in each hand was not merely a physical advantage, but also a mental one. It trained the practitioner to be ambidextrous in thought and action, forcing them to use both sides of their brain, so to speak. Imagine trying to coordinate both your left and right hands for completely different yet simultaneous tasks. That takes some serious brain power and coordination. Historians still argue whether Musashi truly intended the Book of Five Rings solely as a martial arts treatise, or if he consciously aimed for it to be a broader philosophical work applicable to leadership and life, given its later widespread adoption in diverse fields. What's clear is its profound influence across many domains. The Book of Fire focuses on the dynamics of battle, the difference between victory and defeat. Musashi discusses the importance of speed, timing, and decisive action. He talks about knowing when to attack, when to retreat, and how to create opportunities. It's about the heat of the moment, the strategic decisions made under pressure, and how to maintain the initiative. This is where he gets into the nitty-gritty of actual combat scenarios, from charging an enemy to breaking their spirit. The Book of Wind is a critique of other sword schools and their techniques. Musashi points out their flaws and rigidities, emphasizes his own school's adaptability and superiority. This section is less about his own methods and more about understanding and countering the methods of others. It's like a detailed competitive analysis report, but written with the intention of literally disarming your competition. He basically says, here's why everyone else is doing it wrong. Finally, the Book of Void is the most philosophical and abstract. Musashi discusses the way of nature and the emptiness that transcends all forms. It's about seeing beyond the obvious, understanding the imperceptible, and achieving a state of no mind or ultimate clarity. It's about intuition, spontaneous action, and the ultimate mastery that comes from letting go of rigid thought. This is where he goes full Zen master, taking his martial insights to a spiritual level. The Book of Five Rings quickly became, and remains, a foundational text for martial arts practitioners, business strategists, and anyone interested in the principles of success and self-mastery. Its insights into timing, rhythm, and the psychology of conflict are truly timeless. Musashi, the invincible duelist, transformed into a sage, leaving behind a guide that transcends his own era and specific discipline. So, Musashi's Book of Five Rings stands as a monumental achievement, encapsulating his unique blend of practical experience and profound philosophical insight. It solidified his legacy not just as a master swordsman, but as a universal strategist, a wise hermit who left the world a guide to winning not just battles, but the game of life itself. His story now transitions as we turn our gaze to a different kind of master, one who wielded not just a sword, but the fate of an entire nation. As the philosophical insights of Miyamoto Musashi, the lone swordsman, were being forged in the quietude of a cave, far removed from the political machinations of the capital, another colossal figure was already on the rise, one who would change the face of Japan forever, not with single blade, but with an iron will and relentless ambition. Oda Nobunaga. You see, Nobunaga was the first of three great unifiers of Japan, a brutal but brilliant daimyo, feudal lord, who initiated the arduous process of bringing the fractured nation under a single rule after over a century of civil war. His emergence as a dominant force and his early military successes are a mainstream historical fact, setting the stage for Japan's eventual unification. Imagine Japan in the mid-16th century, a land torn apart by the Sengoku period, the Warring States era. This was a time of endless conflict, where powerful daimyo battled for supremacy, forming and breaking alliances with dizzying speed. Nobunaga, born in 1534 into a relatively minor daimyo family in Owari Province, modern-day Aichi Prefecture, was often called the Fool of Owari in his youth due to his unconventional behavior and disregard for traditional etiquette. But beneath that eccentric exterior lay a keen, strategic mind and an almost terrifying ruthlessness. It was like a medieval gangster movie, but everyone was trying to become the Don of Japan, and Nobunaga was a guy nobody saw coming. You probably won't survive this level of cutthroat political ambition if your idea of a power play is organizing the office potluck. Nobunaga quickly showed his true colors with his first major victory at the Battle of Okahazama in 1560. He faced an overwhelming force led by Imagawa Yoshimoto, a powerful daimyo who vastly outnumbered Nobunaga's troops. Instead of a direct confrontation, Nobunaga used a daring surprise attack, exploiting a heavy rainstorm and Yoshimoto's complacency. He struck at Yoshimoto's main camp, killing the general and scattering his forces. This audacious victory, against incredible odds, immediately propelled Nobunaga into national prominence. It was like winning a major championship with a completely unexpected underdog play, permanently changing how everyone viewed you. A quirky tidbit about Nobunaga's personality was his fascination with Western culture and technology. Unlike many of his contemporaries who viewed foreigners with suspicion, Nobunaga embraced innovation. He was one of the first daimyo to actively promote the use of firearms, arquebus, which had been introduced by the Portuguese. He famously incorporated large contingents of arquebusiers into his armies, understanding their devastating potential against traditional samurai cavalry. He even collected European artifacts and welcomed Christian missionaries, though perhaps more for their strategic value and trade connections than for religious devotion. Imagine a feudal lord who's also a tech enthusiast and an early adopter. That was Nobunaga. Historians still argue whether Nobunaga's ruthlessness was purely a pragmatic necessity for unification in a brutal era, or if it stemmed from a genuinely cruel or megalomaniacal streak. What's clear is that his methods, while effective, were often exceptionally brutal, earning him the nickname the Demon King. Nobunaga's consolidation of power was methodical and relentless. He wasn't afraid to break traditional norms or use any means necessary to achieve his goals. He adopted a policy of destroying any opposing power that stood in his way, whether it was rival daimyo, Buddhist monastic complexes that maintained their own private armies, like the powerful Enryakuji on Mount High, which he famously burned down, or even his own disloyal vassals. His ultimate goal was Tenka Fubu, rule the empire by force. His military campaigns were marked by innovation. Beyond firearms, he was a master of logistics, troop movement, and siege warfare. He built strong, defensible castles and used strategic alliances when it suited him, only to discard them when they no longer served his purpose. His focus was always on the end goal, the complete unification of Japan under his iron fist. He was like a medieval chess grandmaster, but if the chess pieces were actual people and the board was an entire country. So, Oda Nobunaga emerged from the chaos of the Sengoku period not as a traditional samurai hero, but as a revolutionary force. His early victories, his embrace of new military technology like firearms, and his ruthless determination to crush all opposition set him apart. He was a catalyst for unification, a man who dared to challenge the established order and drag Japan, often kicking and screaming, toward a new future of centralized power. The stage was now set for the next chapter of his relentless quest for dominance, with Oda Nobunaga having burst onto the scene, shaking the very foundations of feudal Japan with his ruthless ambition and unconventional tactics. His reign became defined by his relentless drive to unify the fragmented nation. You see, he wasn't content with merely securing his own domain. His vision was absolute control, achieved through military superiority and strategic consolidation. This period, marked by his innovative military methods and calculated expansion, is a mainstream historical fact, demonstrating how one man could reshape an entire country. Imagine Nobunaga, not as a fool of Owari anymore, but as the iron-fisted commander, his eyes fixed on the horizon, constantly seeking to expand his influence. His armies, now heavily reliant on firearms, became a terrifying force. He understood that while traditional samurai honor emphasized individual skill with the sword, masked arquebusiers could decimate cavalry charges and break enemy formations with unprecedented efficiency. He equipped his foot soldiers, the Shigeru, with these new weapons, training them in volley fire techniques that were revolutionary for time. It was like suddenly upgrading from individual slingshots to a fully automatic weapon system, completely changing the rules of engagement. You probably won't survive this level of technological disruption if your battle strategy relies solely on shouting really loud. One of Nobunaga's most famous demonstrations of this innovative approach was at the Battle of Nagashino in 1575. Facing the legendary cavalry charges of the Takeda clan, Nobunaga constructed wooden palisades to negate the cavalry's momentum. He then positioned his arquebusiers behind these defenses, having them fire in rotating volleys, ensuring a continuous hail of bullets. The Takeda cavalry, despite their bravery, were cut down in droves. This battle was a decisive victory, illustrating the devastating effectiveness of firearms when combined with clever tactics, and firmly establishing Nobunaga's military genius. It was like a football team discovering they could score every play by just using a secret new type of super ball. Nobunaga's genius wasn't limited to the battlefield. He was also a master of economic and administrative reform. He abolished toll barriers that had hindered trade, built roads to facilitate troop movement and commerce, and initiated land surveys to improve tax collection. He understood that a strong military needed a strong economic base to support it. He also encouraged the development of castle towns, transforming them into bustling centers of commerce and craftsmanship. He was basically a medieval CEO who knew that both sales and operations needed to be top-notch. A quirky tidbit about Nobunaga's personality was his theatrical flair. He enjoyed dramatic entrances and exits, and often dressed in flamboyant clothing that challenged traditional norms. He even performed the Atsumori dance, a famous no play about a young warrior's final moments before crucial battles, adding a layer of dramatic intensity to his campaigns. Imagine your general doing a full interpretive dance routine before charging into battle. It certainly would make an impression. Historians still argue whether Nobunaga's policy of incorporating commoners and farmers as Shigeru into his firearm units fundamentally undermined the traditional samurai class structure, or if it was merely a pragmatic adaptation that ensured their continued dominance through new means. What's clear is that he was willing to challenge deeply ingrained social norms for military advantage. His consolidation of power also involved ruthless suppression of any opposition, including powerful Buddhist temples that wielded significant military and political influence. the burning of the monastic complex of Enryakuji on Mount High in 1571, where thousands were massacred, sent a chilling message throughout Japan. Nobody was beyond Nobunaga's reach. He dismantled the old power structures, crushing both religious and feudal lords who dared to defy him. This wasn't just warfare. It was total war against anyone who stood in the way of his vision for a unified Japan. Nobunaga also actively promoted trade and welcomed Portuguese and other European merchants, appreciating the firearms and new technologies they brought. While he tolerated Christianity for a time, his primary interest was in the practical benefits these foreign contacts provided, particularly in weaponry and intelligence. He was a pragmatist above all else, always looking for an edge. So, Oda Nobunaga's rise was a brutal and transformative period for Japan. His pioneering use of firearms, his strategic genius on the battlefield, and his relentless consolidation of power reshaped the very nature of warfare and governance. He was a force of nature, driven by an unyielding ambition to unite Japan under a single, absolute rule, leading him ever closer to achieving his ultimate dream, even as danger lurked unseen. As Oda Nobunaga ruthlessly pursued his vision of unifying Japan, seemingly unstoppable in his military might and strategic brilliance, his relentless ambition would ultimately lead to a dramatic and unexpected end. You see, despite his formidable power, Nobunaga, like all great figures, was vulnerable to the very human elements of jealousy, resentment, and ambition within his own ranks. This shocking betrayal and his subsequent death at Hanoji Temple are a mainstream historical fact, marking a pivotal turning point in the unification process he had so nearly completed. Imagine Nobunaga, at the peak of his power in the early summer of 1582, resting at Hanoji Temple in Kyoto. He was surrounded by only a small personal guard, his main forces dispersed across the country, engaged in campaigns to consolidate his vast territorial gains. He felt secure, perhaps too secure, in the heart of the imperial capital, a city he had effectively brought under his control. It was a moment of vulnerability, a brief pause in his relentless march towards total dominion. You probably won't survive this level of overconfidence if your security plan involves leaving your front door unlocked. The betrayal came from within his inner circle, from one of his most trusted generals, Akechi Mitsuhide. Mitsuhide, for reasons that historians still debate, suddenly turned his army against his lord. Some theories suggest personal grievances. Others claim fear of Nobunaga's tyrannical nature, or perhaps even a deeper political conspiracy. Whatever the motive, Mitsuhide's sudden treachery was a shocking act, akin to a Roman general turning on Caesar in his own villa. A quirky tidbit about the events at Hanoji is the sheer speed and unexpectedness of the attack. Nobunaga was reportedly awakened by the sounds of battle, initially believing it to be a skirmish among his own men or a minor external attack. Only when he realized his compound was surrounded by Akechi's forces did the grim truth dawn on him. He famously said, "Mitsuhide?" In disbelief, he had no chance to mount a proper defense. Imagine being woken up by your alarm, only to realize it's actually the sound of an army trying to break down your door. Historians still argue whether Akechi Mitsuhide's motives for betraying Nobunaga were primarily personal, driven by a long-simmering resentment, or if he was acting as part of a larger, coordinated conspiracy involving other powerful figures. What's clear is that his decision to turn on his lord was incredibly audacious and remains one of the great mysteries of Japanese history. Trapped inside the burning temple, with no hope of escape, Nobunaga chose to die with honor. He retreated into a room and committed seppuku, ritual suicide, reportedly attended by his loyal page, Mori Ramaru, who then set the temple ablaze to ensure Nobunaga's body would not be defiled by his enemies. It was a dramatic and fiery end for a man who had lived by the sword and, in the end, fell by it. This act of seppuku underscored the ultimate value of honor in samurai culture, even in defeat. The news of Nobunaga's death sent shockwaves across Japan, plunging the nation back into immediate uncertainty. The hard-won stability he had meticulously built threatened to unravel. His generals, scattered across the country, now had to react quickly. The immediate power vacuum created a frantic race to avenge Nobunaga and claim his mantle. It was like a game of musical chairs, but the music suddenly stopped and everyone grabbed the biggest, sharpest chair. Among those generals, one man acted with incredible speed and strategic brilliance: Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Hearing of the betrayal, Hideyoshi, who was campaigning far to the west, immediately negotiated a hasty truce with his current enemies, executed a legendary Great Return march to Kyoto, and confronted Akechi Mitsuhide. He defeated Mitsuhide's forces at the Battle of Yamazaki just 11 days after Hanoji, avenging his lord, and set himself up as Nobunaga's primary successor. This rapid response cemented his claim to leadership. So, Oda Nobunaga's reign, though cut short by betrayal, was a period of intense transformation for Japan. His death at Hanoji was not just the end of a powerful life. It was a dramatic pivot point that tested the very fabric of the unification process. Yet, even in death, his legacy continued to shape the future, as the swift actions of his loyal general, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, ensured that the path to unification would continue, albeit under a new, equally ambitious leader. From the ashes of Hanoji and the shocking demise of Oda Nobunaga, a new, unlikely figure emerged to pick up the mantle of unification: Toyotomi Hideyoshi. You see, unlike Nobunaga, who was born into a daimyo family, Hideyoshi's origins were incredibly humble. He was born a peasant, a mere Shigeru foot soldier, perhaps even a sandal bearer, before rising to the ranks of Nobunaga's army through sheer talent, cunning, and an extraordinary drive. His meteoric rise from peasant to the undisputed ruler of Japan is a mainstream historical fact, representing an unparalleled feat of social mobility in feudal society. Imagine Hideyoshi, short in stature and famously possessing a monkey-like appearance, but with eyes that missed nothing and a mind that calculated every advantage. He started at the absolute bottom, performing menial tasks, but his loyalty, intelligence, and organizational skills quickly caught Nobunaga's attention. He was known for his quick wit, his ability to charm and negotiate, and his relentless efficiency. He wasn't a master swordsman like Musashi, nor did he possess Nobunaga's chilling ruthlessness. Hideyoshi's genius lay in his political acumen, his logistical prowess, and his ability to win over people. It was like medieval rags to riches story, but instead of inventing a new app, he unified an entire country with charisma and strategic brilliance. You probably won't survive this level of humble beginnings and meteoric rise if your idea of hard work is setting up a new Wi-Fi router. Hideyoshi's immediate action after Nobunaga's death cemented his claim as the legitimate successor. His Great Return march, covering vast distances in record time to avenge his lord, was a testament to his logistical genius and the fierce loyalty he had cultivated among his troops. His swift defeat of Akechi Mitsuhide at the Battle of Yamazaki secured his position over other powerful generals who were still debating their next move. He wasn't the strongest in terms of hereditary claims, but he was the fastest and most decisive. A quirky tidbit about Hideyoshi's early career is the famous story of him warming Nobunaga's sandals. While this might sound like a simple, subservient task, it demonstrated Hideyoshi's keen attention to detail and his ability to anticipate his lord's needs, qualities that impressed Nobunaga. It highlights his incredible dedication and ingenuity, even in the most basic of roles. Imagine if your coffee was always perfectly warm to your preferred temperature without you ever asking. That's the kind of service we're talking about, but with footwear. Historians still argue whether Hideyoshi's humble origins were a greater asset or hindrance to his rise to power. Some suggest it forced him to be more adaptable and resourceful, while others argue it presented constant challenges to his legitimacy among high-ranking samurai. What's clear is that he overcame immense social barriers. Having established himself as Nobunaga's successor, Hideyoshi continued the work of unification, but with a less brutal approach than his predecessor. While he still waged war, he often preferred negotiation, intimidation, and diplomacy over outright destruction. He famously starved out the Hojo clan during the siege of Odawa in 1590, bringing an end to the last major independent daimyo resistance and completing the unification of Japan. His strategic mind often favored siege warfare, which minimized casualties on his own side. Once Japan was unified, Hideyoshi implemented several key policies to consolidate his power and ensure stability. One of the most significant was the sword hunt, Katanagari, of 1588. This decree ordered all peasants and commoners to surrender their weapons, effectively disarming the non-samurai population. This not only prevented future rebellions, but also solidified the distinction between the samurai, the warrior class, and the farmers, artisans, and merchants. It was like a nationwide gun buyback program, but with much sharper consequences for non-compliance. He also conducted a comprehensive land survey across the entire country, standardizing land measurements and improving tax collection. This helped him better understand and control the resources of Japan, centralizing power and laying the administrative groundwork for the future. He was essentially creating the first national census and tax registry, a truly monumental undertaking. So, Toyotomi Hideyoshi's ascent was a testament to his extraordinary talent and ambition, a man who defied the rigid class system of feudal Japan to become its absolute ruler. His strategic genius, his ability to unite a fractured nation, and his pivotal policies, like the sword hunt, not only completed Nobunaga's work, but also fundamentally reshaped Japanese society, laying the foundation for a new era of stability and order. His incredible journey, however, would soon take a turn towards ambitious, yet ultimately ill-fated, endeavors beyond Japan's shores. With Japan finally unified under his shrewd and cunning leadership, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the former sandal-bearer, now stood at the pinnacle of power, gazing out not just over the islands of Japan, but toward the vast, enticing continent of Asia. You see, with internal conflicts largely resolved, Hideyoshi's ambition turned outward, leading him to embark on a grand, yet ultimately disastrous, foreign adventure, the invasions of Korea. These massive, protracted, and ultimately failed campaigns, stretching from 1592 to 1598, are a mainstream historical fact, significantly impacting Japan, Korea, and China. Imagine Hideyoshi, perhaps in his later years, consumed by a grandiose vision of conquering China, which he saw as the ultimate prize. He viewed Korea as merely a stepping stone to this larger goal, demanding passage and tribute. When Korea refused, Hideyoshi unleashed a formidable invasion force, believing his unified samurai armies, hardened by decades of civil war, were unstoppable. It was like a world leader deciding to conquer an entire continent, starting with their next-door neighbor, believing their recent domestic success guaranteed international dominance. You probably won't survive this level of geopolitical overreach without experiencing some serious logistical headaches, and eventually a very public failure. The first invasion in 1592 saw the Japanese forces, composed of seasoned samurai, sweep through the Korean peninsula with astonishing speed. They captured major cities, including Seoul, and seemed on the verge of total victory. Their superior ground forces and the tactical acumen of their generals, like Konishi Yukinaga and Kato Kiyomasa, proved devastatingly effective against the less prepared Korean armies. It was a blitzkrieg, feudal style, demonstrating the sheer military power Hideyoshi had at his disposal after unifying Japan. However, the tide began to turn. The Koreans, with the assistance of the Chinese Ming dynasty, mounted a fierce resistance. Crucially, the Korean Navy, under the brilliant leadership of Admiral Lee Sun-sin, decimated the Japanese supply lines with his innovative turtle ships, Geobuxian. These armored warships, a quirky tidbit in naval history, were unlike anything the Japanese had encountered. They were heavily armed and capable of ramming enemy vessels, effectively cutting off the seaborne resupply that Hideyoshi's land armies desperately needed. Imagine trying to supply a massive land invasion, only for every single one of your cargo ships to be sunk by armored, fire-breathing sea monsters. That's pretty much what Admiral Lee was doing to the Japanese. Historians still argue whether Hideyoshi's primary motivation for invading Korea and China was genuine imperial ambition, a means to keep his now unemployed samurai occupied, or a deep-seated desire for personal glory on an unprecedented scale. What's clear is that the invasions diverted immense resources and attention from internal Japanese affairs. The initial Japanese successes stalled as their supply lines faltered and the combined Korean and Ming forces pushed back. By 1593, a temporary truce was established, but peace negotiations eventually broke down due to Hideyoshi's unreasonable demands, including a Ming princess for a concubine and significant territorial concessions. This set the stage for a second, equally brutal invasion. The second invasion, starting in 1597, was met with even stronger resistance. The Koreans and Ming forces had learned from their earlier defeats, improving their defenses and coordinating more effectively. While Japanese samurai continued to fight bravely on land, the logistical challenges remained insurmountable, exacerbated by Admiral Lee's continued naval superiority. The war devolved into a brutal stalemate, characterized by sieges, scorched earth tactics, and immense suffering on all sides. It was like getting stuck in a very long, bloody tug-of-war, with no clear end in sight. The prolonged conflict in Korea had a profound impact back in Japan. It drained the country's resources, strained Hideyoshi's relationships with his daimyo, who resented the heavy burden of campaigning abroad, and ultimately distracted him from ensuring a stable succession. Many samurai who fought in Korea returned disillusioned and exhausted, having gained little but hardship. The invasions finally came to an end with Hideyoshi's death in 1598. His sudden demise led to the immediate withdrawal of all Japanese forces from Korea. The dreams of continental conquest died with him, leaving behind a legacy of destruction in Korea and a politically fragile Japan. So, Toyotomi Hideyoshi's invasions of Korea, born from his boundless ambition, proved to be a costly and ultimately fruitless endeavor. While they initially showcased the formidable power of his unified samurai armies, they also exposed the logistical limitations of Japanese expansion and highlighted the critical role of naval power. These failed campaigns, ending with Hideyoshi's death, left a power vacuum that would soon be filled by the third and final great unifier, one who had patiently bided his time, learning from the successes and failures of his predecessors. With Toyotomi Hideyoshi's grand ambitions in Korea ending in costly failure, and his sudden death leaving a power vacuum, the stage was set for the final act in Japan's unification drama. You see, while Nobunaga had initiated the process and Hideyoshi had consolidated it, neither had managed to establish a truly lasting and stable government. That task would fall to the third and arguably most patient and calculating of the great unifiers, Tokugawa Ieyasu. His methodical rise to supreme power and the strategic patience that define his approach are a mainstream historical fact, leading to centuries of unprecedented peace. Imagine Ieyasu, a contemporary of both Nobunaga and Hideyoshi, but often overshadowed by their more flamboyant personalities and daring military feats. Born in 1543 into the Matsudaira clan, a minor daimyo family, Ieyasu spent much of his youth as a hostage, first under the Imagawa clan, then Nobunaga. This early experience taught him profound lessons in patience, diplomacy, and the art of survival in a treacherous world. He was a quiet observer, the one taking notes while everyone else was busy making grand speeches or charging into battle. You probably won't survive this level of long-term strategic planning if your idea of patience is waiting for a microwave burrito to finish. Ieyasu initially formed an alliance with Nobunaga, proving himself a loyal and capable general. He expanded his own domains in eastern Japan, steadily building his power base while avoiding direct confrontation with Nobunaga or Hideyoshi. He knew his place for a time. He learned from Nobunaga's ruthless efficiency and Hideyoshi's administrative genius, absorbing the best lessons while meticulously avoiding their fatal flaws. Nobunaga's overconfidence and Hideyoshi's foreign entanglements. It was like he was playing a long game of chess, letting the other players knock each other out while he quietly positioned his pieces for the endgame. A quirky tidbit about Ieyasu was his remarkable ability to switch allegiances and survive. He initially served the Imagawa, then allied with Nobunaga, and after Nobunaga's death, temporarily opposed Hideyoshi before submitting to him. Each shift was a calculated move to preserve his clan and ultimately advance his own power. He famously said, "The strong man is the one who can ride a horse over a stone fence." This adaptability and pragmatism, often seen as cunning or even deceitful by his rivals, was key to his survival in a brutal era. Imagine trying to keep track of his alliances. It would be like constantly updating your relationship status on social media, but with actual betrayals and sword fights. Historians still argue whether Ieyasu's long game was a result of inherent strategic genius, or if he was simply a pragmatic survivor who capitalized on the opportunities presented by his rivals' mistakes and deaths. What's clear is that his cautious approach ultimately led to his triumph. After Hideyoshi's death in 1598, the inevitable power struggle erupted among the 5 great elders and 5 commissioners Hideyoshi had appointed to rule in trust for his young son, Hideyori. Ieyasu, having amassed significant power and influence, skillfully navigated these rivalries, forming alliances and isolating his opponents. He had patiently waited for this moment, carefully building his network of loyal daimyo. The culmination of this long game was the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. This was a decisive battle that would determine the fate of Japan. Ieyasu led the Eastern Army against a coalition of Western daimyo loyal to Hideyori, led by Ishida Mitsunari. It was a massive conflict involving hundreds of thousands of samurai, fought on a narrow plain. The battle hung in the balance for hours, but Ieyasu's tactical brilliance, combined with key defections from the Western Army, most notably from Kobayakawa Hideaki, who switched sides mid-battle, secured his overwhelming victory. Sekigahara was more than just a battle. It was a final act of unification, firmly establishing Ieyasu as the undisputed ruler of Japan. He effectively eliminated all major resistance to his rule, paving the way for a new, centralized government. It was the ultimate mic drop in the grand symphony of unification. In 1603, Ieyasu took the title of shogun, establishing the Tokugawa shogunate in Edo, modern-day Tokyo. This was a deliberate move to distance his power base from the old imperial capital Kyoto and establish a fresh start, firmly rooted in warrior rule. Unlike Nobunaga and Hideyoshi, who died before truly solidifying their governments, Ieyasu ensured a succession and the stability of his new regime. He even implemented a system of alternate attendance, Sankin Kotai, requiring daimyo to spend every other year in Edo, thereby keeping them under close control and preventing them from building up independent power bases. So, Tokugawa Ieyasu, through sheer patience, strategic cunning, and decisive action at Sekigahara, brought Japan under unified, stable rule. His establishment of the Tokugawa shogunate marked the beginning of over 250 years of peace and prosperity, known as the Edo period, transforming the role of the samurai and fundamentally reshaping Japanese society. His predecessors started the fire of unification. Ieyasu built the house and ensured it would stand for centuries. With Tokugawa Ieyasu's masterful victory at Sekigahara and his establishment of the powerful Tokugawa shogunate in Edo, Japan entered an era unlike any it had experienced in centuries, a long, sustained period of peace known as the Edo period, 1603 to 1868. You see, this wasn't just a lull in conflict. It was a deliberate, enforced peace orchestrated by the shogunate to prevent any resurgence of civil war among the daimyo and to solidify samurai rule. This profound shift from an age of constant warfare to over 2.5 centuries of relative stability is a mainstream historical fact, fundamentally transforming the role and identity of the samurai class. Imagine the dramatic change to the samurai. For generations, their purpose had been warfare, training for battle, engaging in duels, serving their lord in conflict. Now, with the shogun firmly in control and internal strife largely eradicated, what was a warrior to do? Their swords, once instruments of war, became symbols of status, rarely drawn in anger. It was like suddenly telling a highly trained, elite military unit that their primary job was now paperwork and ceremonial parades. You probably won't survive this level of professional pivot if your entire identity is tied to being on the front lines. The shogunate implemented a strict hierarchical class system, with the samurai firmly at the top, followed by farmers, artisans, and merchants. This reinforced their social prestige. Even if their direct military utility diminished, they were now the ruling class, serving as administrators, bureaucrats, police, and even scholars. The Bushido Code, once an unwritten set of principles honed in battle, began to be formalized and idealized, emphasizing loyalty, honor, and discipline in civilian life. It was a fascinating evolution from battlefield prowess to bureaucratic excellence. A quirky tidbit about the Edo period samurai was the strict enforcement of the alternate attendance Sankin-kotai system. This required daimyo, feudal lords, to spend every other year in Edo, the shogun's capital, leaving their wives and children there permanently as hostages. This policy drained the daimyo's wealth, making it harder for them to raise armies, and kept them under the shogun's watchful eye. It also stimulated the economy along the major roads as daimyo entourages traveled. But for the daimyo themselves, it was like a mandatory, very expensive, and slightly uncomfortable annual company retreat that never really ended. Historians still argue whether the Sankin-kotai system's primary purpose was indeed to weaken the daimyo economically and politically, or it also served as a means of cultural exchange, fostering a more unified national identity by bringing regional lords and their retainers together in the capital. What's clear is its profound impact on society. The samurai, finding themselves with less opportunity for combat, channeled their formidable discipline into other pursuits. Many became highly educated, studying classical Chinese literature, philosophy, and history. They serve as officials in local and national administrations, managing land, collecting taxes, and enforcing laws. Their skills in organization and their adherence to strict codes of conduct made them effective, if sometimes rigid, governors. Dueling, though less common, still occurred, but often under more regulated circumstances or as private affairs away from public eye. The focus shifted from winning at all costs to mastering the art form of swordsmanship itself, often for a personal refinement and demonstration of skill rather than for immediate survival in battle. The katana remained their soul, but it was sheathed more often than drawn. The cultural life of the samurai also flourished. They became patrons of the arts, participating in tea ceremonies, calligraphy, and poetry. The disciplined mindset of the warrior found new expressions in the meticulous precision of these artistic forms. They learned to cultivate inner calm and aesthetic appreciation, balancing their martial heritage with intellectual and artistic pursuits. It was a far cry from the unkempt, duel-obsessed Musashi of earlier years. The peace of the Edo period allowed for significant population growth, urbanization, and the rise of a thriving merchant class. While merchants were at the bottom of the official social hierarchy, they accumulated considerable wealth, creating new social dynamics that would eventually challenge the samurai's dominance. The world was changing, slowly but inexorably, beneath the surface of enforced tranquility. So, the Edo period was a revolutionary transformation for the samurai. From fierce warriors, they evolved into a sophisticated ruling class, navigating an era of profound peace and stability. This shift redefined their identity, pushing them beyond the battlefield into the realms of administration, culture, and intellect, while maintaining their social prestige through strict adherence to the evolving Bushido code. This long period of stability, however, also inadvertently set the stage for pressures that would eventually challenge the very foundations of samurai rule. As the Edo period deepened its long embrace of peace, the daily life of the samurai, once defined by the clang of swords and the dust of battle, became a meticulously structured existence centered on duty, discipline, and cultural refinement. You see, with the warrior class now largely transformed into administrators and bureaucrats, their lives unfolded within the rigid framework of the Tokugawa shogunate's carefully managed society. This daily routine, balancing their martial heritage with new responsibilities, is a mainstream historical fact, painting a vivid picture of a unique social class. Imagine a samurai waking in his Edo residence, not to the bugle call for battle, but to the gentle sounds of the bustling city. His morning might begin with personal martial training, perhaps practicing kata forms with his katana or honing his archery skills in a private garden. This wasn't for immediate combat, but for self-discipline, maintaining physical prowess, and honoring the martial legacy that defined his very identity. It was like a modern executive still hitting the gym every morning, not for the next big fight, but to stay sharp and maintain their edge. You probably won't survive this level of continuous self-improvement if your idea of morning exercise is reaching for the coffee maker. After training, his day would shift to administrative duties. Many samurai worked in government offices, managing finances, overseeing public works, or administering justice. Their adherence to the Bushido Code, now formalized to emphasize loyalty, integrity, and diligence, made them effective, if sometimes uncompromising, officials. They were the backbone of the shogunate's centralized administration, ensuring laws were followed and taxes were collected. They were essentially the highly disciplined, sword-wielding civil servants of feudal Japan. A quirky tidbit of samurai daily life during this period was the importance of appearance and etiquette. Despite the focus on martial arts, samurai were expected to maintain a dignified and cultured demeanor. This included meticulous grooming, wearing their two swords daisho as a symbol of their status, and adhering to complex social rituals. Imagine having to perfectly arrange your hair, don several layers of clothing, and ensure your swords are gleaming, all before even heading to your bureaucratic desk job. It was quite the commitment to presentation. Historians still argue whether the formalization of Bushido during the Edo period was a genuine reflection of samurai values, or largely an idealized code propagated by the shogunate to ensure loyalty and social order among a warrior class no longer engaged in constant warfare. What's clear is that it became the guiding principle for their conduct. Evenings might involve cultural pursuits. Many samurai were skilled in calligraphy, painting, poetry, especially haiku, and the intricate rituals of the tea ceremony, shinoyu. These artistic endeavors were not seen as soft or unmanly. Rather, they were considered integral to cultivating a refined spirit, balance, and aesthetic appreciation, qualities that complemented, rather than contradicted, their martial training. A true samurai was expected to be both a formidable warrior and a cultured gentleman. It was the ultimate Renaissance man ideal, but with more emphasis on silent reflection and less on public art exhibitions. Socially, the samurai lived a privileged but also highly constrained life. Their status came with numerous rules and expectations, from where they could live to what they could wear. They were forbidden from engaging in commerce, as money-making was considered beneath their honorable station. This economic restriction, ironically, led to increasing financial hardship for many samurai as the merchant class grew wealthy and the economy shifted from an agricultural to a more commercial base. It was a strange situation where the ruling class often found themselves financially struggling compared to the commoners they governed. Their family lives were equally structured, with arranged marriages common and a strong emphasis on lineage and duty. Sons were often trained in martial arts from a young age, even if the prospect of battle was increasingly remote. The traditions of the samurai were passed down, ensuring the continuity of their unique identity through generations of peace. So, The daily life of the Edo period samurai was a fascinating blend of martial heritage and bureaucratic reality. They navigated a world where their swords were rarely drawn, but their discipline, honor, and loyalty remained paramount. This extended period of peace allowed Japanese culture to flourish, but it also gradually eroded the traditional military function of the samurai, setting the stage for profound changes that would come with the eventual reopening of Japan to the outside world. As the long peace of the Edo period continued, bringing stability and cultural flourishing, the rigid social structure enforced by the Tokugawa shogunate, with the samurai at its apex, began to face unprecedented pressures, both internal and external. You see, while the samurai enjoyed their prestigious status, the very peace they enforced gradually chipped away at their economic stability and military relevance. This gradual decline of the samurai class, culminating in their abolition during the Meiji Restoration, is a mainstream historical fact, representing a profound societal upheaval. Imagine the frustration of a samurai, perhaps born into a family that had once been formidable warriors, now struggling financially to maintain appearances. While merchants, officially at the bottom of the social hierarchy, amassed great wealth through trade and commerce, the samurai's income, often a fixed stipend from their lord, stagnated or even declined. Their inability to engage in profitable business meant they were increasingly indebted to the very merchant class they looked down upon. It was like watching your landlord, who you technically outranked, pull up in a brand new, fancy carriage while you're struggling to afford new sandals. You probably won't survive this level of ironic social reversal without feeling a bit resentful. This economic hardship led to a growing dissatisfaction among many samurai, especially the lower-ranking ones. They felt their traditional role was becoming obsolete, their honor diminished by their poverty. Meanwhile, the shogunate itself faced challenges. After centuries of isolationist policies, Western powers, particularly the United States, began to forcefully demand that Japan open its ports for trade. The arrival of Commodore Matthew Perry's black ships in 1853, with their superior technology and military might, dramatically demonstrated Japan's vulnerability and the outdated nature of its feudal defenses. A quirky tidbit from this period of increasing Western contact was the initial reaction of some samurai to foreign customs and technology. While some, like those from the Satsuma and Chashu domains, quickly recognized the need for modernization, others were deeply resistant, clinging to traditional ways and viewing Westerners as barbarians. Imagine trying to explain the internet to someone who still thinks carrier pigeons are cutting-edge communication. That was a cultural gap, but with cannons instead of modems. Historians still argue whether the internal pressures from economic disparity and social rigidity were more significant in bringing about the end of the shogunate and the samurai class, or the external threat of Western imperialism was a primary catalyst for the rapid changes of the Meiji Restoration. What's clear is that both factors played crucial roles. The perceived weakness of the shogunate in dealing with a foreign threat, coupled with growing internal dissent, fueled a powerful movement to revere the emperor, expel the barbarians, saw no joy. This movement, ironically led by disgruntled samurai from powerful outer domains like Satsuma, Chashu, and Tosa, sought to overthrow the shogunate and restore imperial rule, believing this would strengthen Japan against the Western powers. They recognized that true national strength required a centralized modern government, not a decentralized feudal system. The struggle between the shogunate and these pro-imperial forces escalated into open conflict, culminating in the Boshin War 1868 to 1869. Despite loyal samurai fighting bravely for the shogunate, the imperial forces, who had rapidly adopted Western firearms and military tactics, proved superior. The shogun eventually surrendered, bringing an end to over 260 years of Tokugawa rule. It was a final, desperate clash of the old order against the unstoppable tide of modernization. With the shogunate overthrown, the young emperor Meiji was symbolically restored to power, marking the beginning of the Meiji Restoration. This wasn't merely a change of leadership. It was a rapid and radical transformation of Japan's entire political, social, and economic structure. The new government moved swiftly to dismantle the feudal system that had defined Japan for centuries. The abolition of the samurai class was one of the most drastic and painful reforms. In the early 1870s, the samurai's traditional stipends were cut, their right to wear swords in public was abolished, the Heitoriya Edict of 1876, and they were no longer the sole military class. A national conscript army, open to all commoners, was established. For many samurai, this was an unbearable humiliation, stripping them of their identity, their status, and their livelihood. Some resisted, leading to minor rebellions, but the age of the samurai, as a distinct warrior class, was unequivocally over. So, the decline of the samurai was a complex and poignant chapter in Japanese history, driven by internal contradictions and external pressures. The Meiji Restoration, born from a desire to modernize and strengthen Japan, ruthlessly swept away the feudal system and abolished the samurai class, forcing them to adapt to a new world where their swords were no longer supreme. Yet, even in their official demise, the spirit and ideals of the samurai would continue to exert a powerful, enduring influence on Japanese society. Though the formal class of samurai was officially abolished with the sweeping reforms of the Meiji Restoration, their influence, values, and very essence did not simply vanish into thin air. You see, the enduring legacy of the samurai continued to shape Japanese national identity, permeate its culture, and even influence its modern values, far beyond the period of their active existence. This deep, pervasive cultural impact is a mainstream historical fact, demonstrating how ideals can outlive institutions. Imagine modern Japan, a bustling, technologically advanced nation, yet still holding deep respect for concepts like discipline, honor, loyalty, and self-control. Many of these foundational virtues, often associated with what became the formalized Bushido Code, originated and were cultivated within the samurai class over centuries. They became ingrained in the national psyche, subtly influencing everything from corporate culture to educational philosophies. It's like finding a faint scent of Old Spice in a brand new car. The past is still subtly there, informing the present. You probably won't survive this level of historical persistence if your idea of legacy is your last social media post. After the Meiji Restoration, many former samurai, stripped of their hereditary stipends and martial privileges, adapted to the new era with remarkable resilience. Some became prominent figures in the new government, applying their administrative skills and leadership qualities to modernizing Japan. Others found roles in the burgeoning military, police force, or education system, channeling their discipline and loyalty into new forms of service to the nation. A few even became entrepreneurs, bringing their disciplined approach to business. It was like a highly specialized workforce suddenly being retrained for every other job in the country, and remarkably, many excelled. A quirky tidbit about the post-Meiji samurai is how some continued to secretly practice their martial arts, even as public sword wearing was forbidden. These skills were passed down through generations, often evolving into modern martial arts disciplines like kendo, judo, and aikido, which are practiced worldwide today. The spirit of the warrior found new, more formalized and less lethal outlets, transforming combat into a path of physical and spiritual development. Imagine a secret underground club where everyone practices ancient deadly dances. That was sort of the vibe, but with more emphasis on inner peace than actual dueling. Historians still argue whether the popular image of Bushido in modern times is an accurate reflection of the historical samurai code or a romanticized ideal that emerged and was propagated during the Meiji period and beyond to foster national unity and military spirit. What's clear is its powerful resonance. The values of loyalty and duty, paramount in Bushido, became cornerstones of modern Japanese society. This extended to profound loyalty expected in corporations, to the emphasis on group harmony over individual ambition. The concept of honor, which for samurai might have meant ritual suicide to atone for disgrace, evolved into a strong aversion of public shame or failure, driving meticulousness and dedication in work. It's the reason you still see such meticulous attention to detail in so many aspects of Japanese industry and craftsmanship. The disciplined approach to learning and craftsmanship, too, has roots in the samurai ethos. The rigorous training of a swordsman, the patience required to master a technique, translated into a national reverence for skill, precision, and continuous improvement in all fields. This is evident in everything from the intricate art of sushi preparation to the engineering excellence of Japanese automobiles. Even in popular culture, the samurai endure. From classic films like Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai to modern anime and video games, the image of the stoic, honorable, and skilled warrior continues to captivate audiences worldwide. These portrayals, while often romanticized, keep the core ideals of samurai alive in the global imagination. So, while the samurai as a distinct social class officially ended, their spirit and the enduring values they embody became deeply woven into the fabric of Japanese society. From the quiet discipline of Musashi to the transformative leadership of Nobunaga and Hideyoshi, and the long peace enforced by Ieyasu, their collective story shaped a nation. Their legacy is not just in castles and battlefields, but in the very character of Japan itself, a testament to the power of a code that transcended the sword. Now, as our journey nears its end, we'll consider the timeless wisdom these ancient warriors offer us today. As our journey through the lives of legendary samurai and the shaping of Japan draws to a close, we arrive at a crucial point, considering the timeless wisdom for today that the samurai spirit offers. You see, while their world of feudal lords and gleaming swords is long gone, the core principles of Bushido, honor, discipline, loyalty, and resilience remain remarkably relevant, providing insights for navigating our own complex, modern lives. This enduring applicability of their philosophy is a mainstream historical fact, demonstrating universal human values. Imagine yourself in your own daily life, facing challenges, striving for goals, interacting with others. The samurai, through their rigorous training and their life-or-death experiences, cultivated a profound sense of self-mastery. This wasn't just about wielding a sword. It was about mastering one's emotions, thoughts, and reactions. When Miyamoto Musashi spoke of understanding rhythm and timing, he wasn't just talking about a duel. He was talking about the flow of life, the moments to act decisively and the moments to observe patiently. You probably won't survive this level of introspective discipline if your idea of self-control is resisting a second slice of pizza. Their emphasis on discipline is a powerful lesson. The samurai practice relentlessly, not just their martial arts, but also their calligraphy, their tea ceremony, their meditation. This cultivation of consistent effort, even when it's mundane or difficult, builds character and skill. It teaches you that true mastery isn't about grand gestures, but about the steady, incremental improvements made every single day. Think of it as embracing the grind, but with a centuries-old, honorable twist. The concept of loyalty, while often interpreted through the lens of a lord-vassal relationship, can be broadly applied to modern contexts. Loyalty to your values, your family, your team, or your community. It's about commitment and standing by what you believe in, even when it's challenging. This unwavering dedication, a hallmark of samurai character, reminds us of the power of strong, consistent allegiances in building trust and achieving shared goals. A quirky tidbit is how the aesthetic principles of the samurai, such as wabi-sabi, the appreciation of imperfection and transience, or mono no aware, the gentle melancholy of things, can be seen as a form of emotional discipline. It was about finding beauty and acceptance in the ephemeral and imperfect nature of life, cultivating an inner peace amidst the chaos of their world. Imagine finding profound beauty in a slightly chipped teacup or a fading autumn leaf. It's a deeply calming perspective to cultivate in our fast-paced lives. Historians still argue whether the contemporary popularity of Bushido in Western business and self-help literature genuinely captures its historical essence, or if it simplifies and commodifies a complex cultural and martial philosophy. What's clear is its widespread appeal across diverse fields. The samurai's unwavering sense of honor teaches us the importance of integrity and reputation. While their specific customs, like seppuku, are extreme and rooted in a different era, the underlying principle of living a life true to one's principles, of standing by one's word, and striving for excellence remains universal. It's about building a reputation not just for what you do, but how you do it, and who you are when no one is watching. Their resilience in the face of adversity, exemplified during the Mongol invasions or the long Sengoku period, is perhaps their most potent lesson. They faced overwhelming odds, adapted, persevered, and found ways to overcome. This spirit of tenacity, of refusing to be broken by hardship, is a powerful inspiration for anyone facing personal or professional challenges today. It's about getting back up after every fall, even when you feel like you can't. Finally, the samurai's constant pursuit of self-mastery encourages us to look inward. They sought to understand themselves, their strengths, their weaknesses, and their motivations. This journey of introspection, of continuous learning and refinement, is a path toward genuine personal growth. It reminds us that the greatest battles are often fought within, and the greatest victories are won against our own limitations. So, the legacy of the samurai, from the legendary duels of Musashi to the unifying visions of Nobunaga, Hideyoshi, and Ieyasu, is far more than just a historical curiosity. It is a wellspring of profound wisdom, a guide to living a life of purpose, integrity, and strength. Their code, forged in steel and refined through centuries of peace, continues to echo through time, offering us enduring lessons in how to navigate our own warring states and achieve our own forms of mastery. Now, as the echoes of ancient Japan gently fade and the whispers of history blend with the quiet hum of the night, feel the comfort of your surroundings. Let the images of disciplined warriors, serene gardens, and towering castles drift like clouds across your mind. The stories have played their part, reminding you of the strength that lies within, the honor in every action, and the peace that follows true effort. Allow yourself to release any lingering thoughts, any worries that may still cling to the edges of your awareness. Feel your body growing heavy, sinking deeper into the soft support beneath you. Each breath is a wave, a gentle tide pulling you further into tranquility. The air is still, the darkness complete, and a profound sense of calm washes over you. There's nothing left to do, nowhere left to be. But here, in this peaceful moment, as you drift effortlessly into the embrace of a deep and restorative sleep, sweet dreams.